everybody, and welcome back to the show. The Atheist Experience is live September 22nd, 2002. This show is sponsored by Atheist Community of Austin. We're a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m. at Hot Jumbo Bagels, which is downtown 307 West 5th Street, between Guadalupe and Lavaca, except for the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series in the Longhorn Room of First Cafeteria in North Cross Mall. Our next lecture will be 2 Sundays from now, and our speaker will, because next Sunday's the 30th, okay. And so then I guess that'll be...
Okay, I thought we had one. I thought this was the last weekend of the month for some reason.
No, this is...
okay.
So I think October 6th it will be that day, and our speaker will be a fellow named Don Baker, who will be talking about memetics. Be interesting. Those little ideas that percolate through society and infect all our minds. So there we are. I'm Martin, that's Ashley, and with us on the air today is Keryn Glasser. Hi. Our illustrious producer's sister. He himself is not here today, so I guess she's filling in to make sure that...
other producers,
that we've got it all together, which we don't. We're a little discombobulated today, but we're getting it all going on. As usual, we have news, announcements, and what have you. I'll just go through the announcements really quickly. Godless Gamers meet every Monday night, 7 o'clock p.m. at the home of Russell and Virginia Glasser. And Atheist Happy Hour is a Thursday night event at Antonio's Tex-Mex near the intersection of I-35 and Highway 183, and that starts at about 7:30-ish in the evenings, and people trickle in all through the night. And that's a fun evening get-together. The Nonprofits is our weekly internet radio show at 2 o'clock p.m. every Saturday at the atheistnetwork.com website. It's an MP3 stream, and there is a live chat room feature that runs concurrent with the program. And lots of fun, hosted by Jeff D., Vic Farrow, Mary McManamy, and pretty much whoever else is in Russell's house that day puts in an appearance on the show to some degree. Tons of fun, nonprofits, and you can listen to archived back episodes of the show at our website, atheist-community.org, on the radio show page. Godless Americans March on Washington, still slated for November 2nd of this year. That's like just barely more than a month off. And it looks like I'm not going to be able to make it, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because this film I'm working on goes through mid-November.
Right. Okay.
And I just won't be able to, like...
Okay.
So darn. But I think I'm going to support him anyway. I'm going to get a T-shirt and pretend I went. I'll be a poser.
Well, also, some people in the group are kind of tossing around the idea of doing something here on the 2nd, also on the same day at the Capitol, possibly. So exactly what'll come of that, if anything, is still very questionable. Okay. But the idea's out there, at least.
I know that 7 or 8 atheists marching on the Texas Capitol would gather any particular notice, but that's there you are.
Can't hurt, might help.
Sure. But if nothing else, it would...
it'll be an excuse for lunch.
There you are. Yeah. But anyway, for more information about that, you can go to godlessamericans.org. It would be nice if they had a decent turnout, if only for the opportunity for atheist groups around the nation to just become acquainted with one another.
Yeah.
And I don't expect that it will change any attitudes in the public, in the corridors of power about atheists and atheism.
Like the whole networking thing going on among us.
Exactly, and that's how we'll manage to get our voice heard eventually. And finally, University Atheists and Agnostics, the wildly successful group apparently that started up by our very own Charles Tabany at the University of Texas at Austin, new student group, meets Fridays at 4 o'clock p.m. in 310 Parlin. That hasn't changed as far as I know. And that is a brand new Atheist and Agnostic student group that has hit the ground running. And we're very proud of Charles and Andy and our group who have kind of really been taking the reins of that thing. So, cool. Here we are. For more information about us, you can visit our lovely website at atheist-community.org. Any time of the day or night. It's wide open for you. Okay, but first, before we go to news, last week on the show, I promised that we were going to have that tape of our September 11th secular memorial that took place, let's say a week ago Wednesday at Woolridge Square downtown. And sure enough, we have it. This is just a 10-minute highlight reel I put together. Here it is.
It's a little boring.
Yeah. I don't... Technical difficulties. Who'd have thunk it?
He can't get it going. He can't figure out how to get it going. Right?
Okay, someone in the control room is going to figure out, I say going to figure out how to get that tape going while Ashley goes ahead and does the news. So let's go ahead and go to Ashley while we have news going on.
Okay, I got a couple of quick stories here. First one, out-of-body experiences. I actually did some reading on this.
I've had one.
Seriously?
We know you have.
Okay.
You have them all the time, and we see you. It's fun.
Yeah, I did some reading on this several years back, before I got into this whole atheist thing, when I was still trying to figure out, what's going on. There's got to be something to all this psychic stuff that's going out, because, hey, everybody and their sisters had one, so.
Oh, yeah, they're fun.
And so I was doing some reading up on it and stuff, and now it turns out that they have discovered potentially where this could lay in the brain, what actually causes it. There is a little spot in the brain. This was actually how they found this out. There was a lady who was epileptic, and they were trying to do some brain scans and tests on the brain to find out exactly what's going on with her. And they found that if they plug an electrode in the upper right-hand corner above the ear in her brain, section called the angulus gyrus, I think, something like that. Angular gyrus. And they basically shocked it, or turned it off or something like that. She would have an out-of-body experience. She would feel like she's either sinking down to the bed or floating up, about 6 feet above her body and stuff like that. And she could actually look around the room and, was just kind of making weird mental things happen. And
Dissociative experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just the link between her mind and her body was just broken, shut down for a couple of seconds, and she could get up and float out of her body and stuff like that.
So is this like the guy in Canada who has developed the helmet that he plops on your head, and he can actually create these same sort of similar dissociative experiences in the body?
I think this is a separate part, but yes, it is similar to that. Now, also by the name of this, angular gyrus, it sounds like it could have something to do also with balance. Because also in your ears is where they have the organs that keep track of balance.
So whatever keeps you orientated is out of whack.
And so if they shock that part of the brain, which also keeps track of your balance, you
You'd
might get
dizzy out of body.
strange feelings where you feel like you're moving.
Cool.
And stuff like that.
All right, very cool.
And so, yeah, that could be part of it. It's just you don't actually feel like you're leaving your body, but you have this sensation that you're moving forward.
Yeah.
And when you're laying down, that's up.
Yeah. So again, all these kinds of wild spiritual experiences that people have,
They're just weird, messed up brain stuff.
It's coming from the brain chemistry.
Yes.
Now that doesn't make it any less interesting.
Oh no,
But
I'd love
again,
to be
I
able
mean,
to do this.
yeah.
This would be awesome.
But it does kind of poop on the whole, idea that there's really not this spirit world where people are contacting you from.
Yeah.
But of course, now believers are never gonna, be swayed by anything like mere evidence, right? I mean, if these out-of-body experiences are these genuine religious and spiritual experiences to them, then they're gonna want to hang on to that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But that seems to be the case, that it's just our brains doing stuff, and brain chemistry is capable of things can happen to your brain that are really, really strange, depending on how you mess up the chemistry of it. Even things that would seemingly not make sense. I've read about people who have suffered damage to parts of their brain where they can no longer read, but they can write. And 2 minutes later, 2 minute later, they can't read what they've just written.
Wow.
It's very bizarre. So you wouldn't the very concept just doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
But strange things can just happen to your brain chemistry that can cause everything to suddenly not make sense.
Also situations where people actually regain senses that they didn't have before. As in those guys who had blind when he was 2 or 4 years old, really young.
Yeah.
And then when he was 30 or something, he had an operation where he got back some of his sight. And because he'd been blind for so many years, he didn't know his visual part of the brain just didn't work.
Yeah.
And so he could not recognize things. He could only really see colors and shapes and stuff like that, but he would recognize things in context. If he was at a basketball game and he saw something orange, that must be the ball. But there could be a car on the side.
Yeah.
And that would kind of throw him off. And he would look at something, that was round and sitting in front of him, and he couldn't tell that was round until he touched it. And then he had that, sensory input of his hand.
Interesting.
And then he knew it was round, but not because of how it looked.
Yeah.
That linkage wasn't
So he had
there.
all these new sensations that he had to get used to from scratch.
Exactly. It just didn't make sense.
Weird.
So yeah, it was really, really interesting article. That was a couple months back. But yeah, it was really weird.
Well, it's all in your mind, everyone. All in your mind.
We're not really here.
You know, that's actually not necessarily in the mind, because I do kind of feel a little again, this is kind of a discombobulated day here at the studio, but we're doing all right. Now, before we talk to you, Keryn, I've heard, did we jump, is it true that we actually seem to have things ready in the control room with the tape? I'm told that the tape is ready to go. So we're going to give this another shot, and we'll see. Rally, the September 11th secular memorial that took place a week ago Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia is a very requested place.
One another, living life just like the games that people play. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Don't take it personally. Know that it can be hard sometimes to separate the dancers from the dance, but we all don't see go. All you can change is how you treat the ebb and flow. And even so, you go.
I'm Michelle Gadush. I'm co-chair of the Atheist Community of Austin. I'd like to welcome everybody here today and all our new friends. The title of this memorial is Reflections on September 11th, a Secular Memorial. The reason we decided we needed to have our own memorial was because a lot of the other memorials tend to be religious in nature, and atheists or non-religious people really need to have one of our own. Okay, 1 year ago today, over 3,000 people, both American and foreign nationals, got up and went to work just like any other day, but on that day they never came home.
Alok Agarwal. When Alok Agarwal first left Delhi for the United States in 1997, his wife Shafali and his son Ankush cried because he was leaving. "Why are you leaving us?" his wife recalled thinking. James Barbella was a former United States Marine, and that made certain of his habits. The day-to-day decisions he'd be likely to make. Kenneth Marcus Kenny Caldwell. You know how most people have to bend down to scratch their knee? Kenny Caldwell did not, because he had hands the size of baseball mitts and arms that went on forever. Sorry.
Things will never be the same after September 11th, 2001. But we can't get too lost in the rhetoric coming from politicians from all over the world, our own president, our Congress, that we live in a world full of evil, full of evildoers, full of badness, full of hopelessness, because we don't. We outnumber them. There are more of us than there are them.
For a short period of time, the United States really seemed to be unified. We were a nation in mourning. We all had a grief that we shared, even though most of us didn't personally know anyone who died in the tragedy. Everyone seemed just a little more sympathetic towards each other. Well, human nature being what it is, it's not really surprising that this camaraderie didn't last very long. The first crack that I noticed came from an unsurprising source, Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell. Instead of offering moral support and positive suggestions, they began casting around for someone to blame. It was on September 13th, just two days later, that Jerry and Pat appeared on the 700 Club to offer these words of support and comfort to our nation. What we saw on Tuesday, as terrible as it is, could be minuscule if, in fact, God continues to lift the curtain and allow the enemies of America to give us probably what we deserve.
Also, the heroism of the emergency personnel who wrote their social security numbers on their arms before they went in, because they knew there's a pretty good chance they weren't coming out. And they wanted to make sure their bodies would be identified.
Good and kind people outnumber all others by thousands to one. Every spectacular incident of evil will be balanced by 10,000 acts of kindness.
Falwell then went on to explain why we deserve what we got. It would seem that it's all the fault of a laundry list of groups. The American Civil Liberties Union, pagans, abortionists, feminists, gays, and lesbians, they all make his God angry. At the same time, something else was happening in America. Reports of hate crimes against people of Arabic descent started coming in.
I have seen an increase in intolerance in this country that I thought I would never see. I thought we were past that. But suddenly, unless you're Christian or Catholic, somehow you're un-American.
We look at each other and start looking for reasons to dislike each other, when we should look at each other and just see human beings and potential friends.
A common thread that we see through all this is Americans attacking other Americans, looking for easy rules of thumb to tell us who the bad guys are. No such rules exist, of course, especially in a pluralistic society where many different ways of life are represented. We're letting generalizations get in the way of thinking. Unfortunately, we atheists are sometimes guilty of this habit also. How many people were listening to what I just said about Robertson, Falwell, and Graham and thinking to yourselves, see, that just goes to show that you can't trust them religious peoples. But in fact, it's not that being a member of a particular religion makes you a bad person, any more than not being a member of any religion. There are some fine and wonderful Christians out there, just as much as there are fine and wonderful Muslims and atheists. The danger that any religion poses occurs only when its members become entrenched in the idea that our metaphysical truth is right and theirs is so wrong that there's no hope that we can even communicate. Jerry Falwell said it about large numbers of Americans. Franklin Graham said it about all Muslims, and Osama bin Laden said it about us. In that sense, when fundamentalism is practiced to extremes in this country, it mirrors the sort practiced in Afghanistan.
Lisa and Samantha were sisters and co-workers, and they did most things together, including playing sports, visiting their parents on Long Kathleen Kit Farragher. Firefighter Thomas Gambino Jr. An 18-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department, Tom worked for the last 18 months of his career
Kaplan.
to rescue 3. When Robin Kaplan's friends bickered, she would chime in, "Harmony." She was the peacekeeper. And if they kept fighting, she would put her hand to her temple and say, "Oh, my head."
This remembrance is surely only one of tens of thousands that are occurring across our nation today, and a small one at that. Yet it's special and unique in this city, probably in this state, one of the very few of its kind across the nation. In seeking our roots as humans, it's said that one of the first ways we came to recognize past primates as human was that they remembered and honored their dead. Perhaps an honor as simple as a flower in the grave with the deceased. And surely, in the throes of passionate grief and anger and profound loss that accompany these events, we ask for explanation and justification of the loss and cast about for ways to ensure that the loss will not be permanent and go unremembered. Why? That first, most irrepressible, simple, and profound question imposes on our mind. And the answer, equally simple and profound, there is no why. There is a last den of dragons that exists in the human psyche, hatched from several worldviews that proclaim with all the self-righteous ferocity of medieval inquisitors that our day-to-day existence is of little value, and that we should instead aspire to some perfumed and music-filled hereafter. We saw the seeds of those dragons come to fruition as their spawn rose in rage and frustration and steely dedication to hurl themselves in fiery chariots against the gleaming steel towers of a modern age that gave them no comprehensible path to resolution. In that horrific cataclysm, there was no victory for anyone. And we owe it to all who died on that day to resolve within our culture, within the roots that all humans share, within the very definition of what it means to be human, to resolve the ultimate value of each human being in the here and now, and to provide for every human the ability to realize their potential as a human in this present life.
Well, there you have it. That was our September 11th secular memorial, which was held at Woolridge Square. It was like a week ago Wednesday on September 11th. Very nice, lasted about an hour. As you heard, some really strong, very good speeches given, which I only gave snippets of. Naively, I thought that I could put together about a 3-4 minute highlight reel of that event, and it just didn't happen. I mean, the best I could do was like 10 minutes, just to really give a feel for it all. Yeah. And so it's great. I know that the transcripts of a couple of the complete speeches are on our website at atheist-community.org, and but this is just an example of the kinds of civic stuff that ACA has been doing more and more of lately, and we're going to keep doing more and more stuff out there for the public, for unbelievers in Austin, to have an opportunity to feel like we can participate just in the process. Yeah. The whole reason, as you heard Michelle say on the tape, of having the rally in the first place was that so many of the rallies that were held were so heavily religious in nature that secular citizens and unbelievers just did not have a venue to go to where we could memorialize, the theism-based attacks that happened a year ago. Yeah. And so it was, once again, really nice little affair. Small, there were maybe 50 people there, but it was definitely worth it. So thanks again to Michelle for really being the one to get that going. And thanks to Steve for figuring out the labyrinthine control room and getting that tape rolling for us. So hooray.
And Martin for putting it together in the first place.
You're welcome. Okay, Keryn. You're here.
I'm here.
You're on the show. Hi.
Hi.
Now, you've just come to Austin from Arizona, and you want to get into gerontology, right?
Yes.
Social work, dealing with the elderly. And this has to do, when you're going to end up in your line of work, dealing with a lot of death and dying, and what involves in that. And that's really pretty interesting, because a lot of people are curious as to how unbelievers deal with death and dying. One aspect of religion that I think we can all agree about is that it is this thing that tends to provide people with this whole placebo by which they get to feel good about the fact that you die. Which is a thing that no one really wants to do. It doesn't just comfort you with about death, period. It actually makes believers really kind of think that death is a thing to be eager to look forward to, as we saw on September 11th. But it's all very creepy. Concepts like heaven and was this thing invented to make people feel not so bad about the fact we die. But unbelievers, and atheists, we don't have that kind of thing. Death is just a reality that we have to learn to face and live with. And how do you think that might play into your own social work and what you might do in your career?
Well, I think in my career, I'm going to see a lot of, not just death and dying issues, but also just a lot of stuff dealing with the end-of-life process. And when people, especially when somebody knows, when someone gets hit by a car in the middle of their life, you can't really deal with those issues as much as when someone is dying of a terminal illness. When someone is dying with a terminal illness, it's almost kind of fortunate, because you can look at those issues, you can deal with them together as a family. Hopefully, you can start to examine, if you're given enough advance notice, like you have cancer or you have something and you're going to die soon, and what do you want to do left with your life before you die? What do you want to say to your family? What kind of provisions do you want to make? And is there anything that you wanted to accomplish during your life that you might still be able to accomplish in some way? And then there's even a big movement these days with people start to plan their own funerals and their own aftercare, which it's called aftercare these days. And it's kind of nice to be able to be involved in that process. It's the last thing that you can be in control of, especially if there's a lot of things in your life that you start to lose control of.
You at least choose to die with a degree of dignity. But now, do you anticipate that it might be harder if you, for example, are dealing with, I don't know, do you call them clients or patients, or?
It depends on where you're working, really. If I was working in a nursing home, they'd be residents.
Residents, okay. Well, let's say you're dealing with someone. Is it harder if that person is an atheist than if they were Christian or Jewish or some other faith? Because, again, there just seem to be fewer established processes out there for atheists to just deal with things that religious people, being in the majority in our culture, take for granted, such as, I guess, aftercare, and funerals and that sort of thing. And probably only a very small minority of the people you will ever deal with are going to be atheist. But do you anticipate that it's already? Do you know already? Do you already have some sort of sense yet if there aren't resources out there for dying atheists as opposed to a dying Christian?
There are. In fact, I just read a wonderful book that's part of our library that's called Funerals Without God.
Okay.
And I was kind of hoping to write some sort of textbook eventually after I've gotten into the practice a little bit more. I tend to go about the whole thing from a non-religious perspective. Even if I'm working with a religious person, I don't try to prevent them from feeling religious about it, but I can still approach them with other more logistical issues, or just I can be a comfort without having to talk about God. I think you had mentioned that a lot of people don't prepare for it.
Well,
I'm losing my...
Well, well, not so much don't prepare for it, but again, it's atheists. It just seems like there are fewer resources, or the resources are just less well known for atheist families, relatives of atheists, to deal with the whole process of aging and dying. And it seems to me that another problem that could crop up would be if you have, say, an atheist family member in a situation where most of the family are religious, and that person is dying, and there could be a conflict when the survivors who are religious insist upon giving the dying person some sort of religious funeral or send-off, and they don't want that. But how can they, here's another knotty issue, how can that person control what's happening, what happens to them after they die, how they are memorialized? What provisions are in place to protect, say, an elderly atheist who then dies, and the survivors want to go ahead and have this big church funeral for them and pray over the body, when the dying atheist might just not want that, might want a perfectly secular funeral. How are you able to? What are the options by which anyone can ensure that religious family members will respect the wishes of their dead atheist relative and not? I know they think they're honoring that person's memory, but in fact they're kind of insulting their memory by just defying and denying that person's right to be an unbeliever and to be memorialized the way they wish to be. I mean, what's in place to protect those rights?
There are a number of things that you can do.
Because I'm not to interrupt you, but I know that in other areas, the wishes of the dead are quite often ignored when the families have things that they'd rather do.
Especially when you get to homosexual seniors who have had a life partner, and sometimes at that point, if there's been no provisions taken in advance, sometimes when that person dies, their life partner, who may have been living with them for 25 years, 30 years, the family doesn't want them to come to the funeral, and they certainly won't let them have any of the, say these people were living together and they were sharing a house together.
Won't let that person have the house.
And they won't let the person have the house. They figure in order, I think there's actually an order of who it gets willed to if there was like no will that dictates it, that it will go to the spouses first, the children second, the legal spouses first, the children second, the siblings third, and significant others, life partners, are like way down there on the list. Maybe not that far, maybe even like number 6, but still. It could be a family that was uncomfortable with the whole with their lifestyle, and when they found out that this person was homosexual, stepped out of that person's life and didn't talk to them for like the last 15 years, the last 30 years, whatever. And now that they're dead, they want to come in and step in and take possession of all the issues.
Just
but
ultimately heartless.
Oh, it's very heartless.
But again, the
very
families
hard.
don't see it that way, right? They're just sort of like, no, we're doing what's right. And,
No, this is the person that they lived with for the last 15 years. Hypothetical example, of course, but still, just to say, sorry, but we don't agree with you, and so get out of our way while we split up the house among our family members and stuff like that.
Take control of the funeral.
Hey, really sorry for you, but leave now,
a lot
please.
of stuff that's just really not very nice goes on after you have a person die.
There
I know living wills are frequently violated too.
That's
When
what I
you have
was gonna
somebody
say.
who's all vegetative and they're on a life support, and
it's a tough issue. There's a lot
so
of
you have to assume
paperwork.
that if it's that bad for something like for elderly gay people who are dying and just people who are on life support and living wills being violated, you've got to assume that atheists are having very similar problems, and that I think is a very important issue. Is how do you protect that?
There is there are provisions that you can make, and it's always a good idea to start making them now. I don't know if you guys have dealt with it at all. A lot of people don't want to, just because they think if they start facing those issues, they're going to jinx themselves. I don't know if atheists believe in jinx, but they think
no, we don't.
They don't want to. They don't want to talk about and deal with end of life stuff. The majority of people don't want to deal with end of life stuff because it's a bad vibe. It's a bad thing to talk about. It's a very faux pas subject to even talk about, which we have to change. But you can fill out.
Well, because it makes people think of their own mortality, which they don't want to think about.
You can fill out, for example, you can fill out a power of attorney, which is a paperwork which says you can have a financial power of attorney and a legal power of attorney, the person who has the right to make decisions for you, especially if you make those.
But you have to assume that some of these gay couples you were talking about do that. So
not many, that's the problem.
So they just don't think ahead.
They don't think ahead.
Well, it's education
That's
also.
the problem. It is. It's a very education issue, and I see that people who have been through it, they've lost a family member where they weren't prepared, are a lot more likely to start planning that for the rest of their family. You can fill out a power of attorney. This means that if you are an atheist and you have a family that's very, very religious, and say this has been causing friction between you and your other family members, you can fill out a power of attorney, which says that if I lose the ability to make my own decisions for my own care, then I want this person to be able to make those decisions for me. Which means that if I get even if you're not a senior, if you get struck by a car and you're in a coma, and you have a power of attorney, then that person can be the one that makes the decisions for you, and it can be a friend that thinks a lot like you have a lot in common with. You could be like your best friend in the world, which means that they're more likely to be the person that knows what you would have wanted.
Right.
There can be legal issues that crop up.
So that's just a practical way to make sure that your rights are protected.
It's a very practical way to make sure that your rights are protected. You can fill out a living will. Which and a living will is a good thing, because in your living will you
but
can
as we know,
say,
they do get violated.
Right.
They do just get it, or just flatly ignored, and then they're all.
How legal are these documents? Power of attorney, living will, stuff like that. As in, if the family decides, I'm sorry, but this person that we don't know anything about is now making all the funeral arrangements.
Well, I think power of attorney would be something that would be, pretty solid.
Yeah.
Well, as I understand it, and I'm not completely immersed in the issue yet, but you can write your own living will and your own power of attorney. You can sign your name to it, and you can have somebody else sign it, and it is considered a legal document. If you want to be really, really sure And also, it's a very good idea if you have these to make copies of it, many copies of it.
Yeah.
Keep one for yourself. Give one to your family, and if you want, you can give one to a lawyer that you trust. You can go and you can get legal forms from lawyers that deal with. There are specific lawyers that deal with gerontology issues.
And I'm sure there's a ton of stuff on the internet.
Oh, there's a ton of stuff on the internet. In fact, you can probably get some of these forms and print them out on the internet.
Yeah.
There are even
and as you said, good idea to start thinking about it even when you're young. It's like my dad and I have talked about this actually, and it's like he's the aging guy, but he said, well, Martin, but if something happens to you, if I don't have something, I can't even sell your truck. So it's like it's a thing to just concern yourself.
And there's
with.
other things. I mean, I've sat down and I've asked my parents. I said, well, I know that my parents are both. Well, actually, my dad's an atheist. My mom is sort of ambiguous. What do you care what happens to you after you die? I mean, you'll be dead, so do you actually care? Do you want?
I want to be shot out of a cannon.
Do you want a funeral? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be flushed down the toilet? Do you, do you want to be sprinkled in a lake somewhere? Do you care what happens? Do you want, what do you want to happen to you? Can I take down notes, put it in my computer so that if anything happens to you, and you're not prepared for it, I'll have anything that I can turn to. And I've talked to my parents about this, and I've taken notes on it, and it's a good thing to re-talk about it every once in a while just to make sure nothing's changed.
Right.
If there's anybody new in their life they want to include, even if it's not a formal legal thing, at least I know where my parents stand. Personally, I'd like to be cremated and sprinkled somewhere just so that I don't have to take up land space in some cemetery. Not necessarily so that I can spend eternity in a beautiful serene.
But you don't want to have your body intact for the big resurrection when it happens. So we're going to go ahead and get the phone number to call us in. This is a live call-in show. We're just going to go ahead and throw that up on the screen while we're talking to Keryn and let a few of the phone calls rack up. But it's all very interesting, and you're right. It is something that people need to think about. No one really wants to think about it when you're still in your 20s and 30s, but you ought to.
Well, and from what you're describing, it sounds like 20 minutes of sit-down time to think about it and get these forms and fill something out.
Exactly.
It's what it takes. It's not a 3-week process.
But it's like paying bills. You just kind of put off as long as you can.
True.
But for atheists, again, it is vitally important to think about. I'd say even more so than just you're a Christian or a religious citizen, because again you are going to have these issues. If it does concern you, some atheists might not care. Okay, but if it concerns you that, you're just like, look, I'm an atheist who I am. I don't want to have some big religious funeral with people sprinkling holy water on me and saying prayers because I think all that's nonsense, okay? And I would just like to have that aspect of my life respected when I go. It's very important to just make sure you have that power of attorney set up, that you have your will, all properly composed and everything. And just make sure that someone you trust is in charge of that when you go.
DNR forms also. There's also, recently my grandmother died on my father's side, and she had been being taken care of by my aunt, my dad's sister, for the past several months or years. I don't even remember how long she needed to be taken care of. I wasn't very involved in the issue, but when she died, my aunt was phenomenally burnt out. Taking care of someone at the end of life is very, very rough. She was very burnt out, and also that whole side of my family are atheistic. And my aunt figured, it's over, it's done. If you wanted to say anything to her before she died, you're too late now. Hopefully you got in ahead of time. If you had any issues to deal with, hopefully you've been dealing with it. She's dead, she's gone, it's done. There's nothing left to do. And she decided that she didn't want to have a funeral. This was very rough.
Your aunt or your...
My aunt decided that she didn't want to have a funeral for my grandmother. She thought it was just too much of a responsibility to deal with. She was tired of it, and it was too late now. My
did
grandmother,
anyone know?
Well, actually, my grandmother probably wouldn't have wanted a funeral either. A few years earlier, my grandfather had died. Her husband had died of cancer, and they had decided not to have a funeral for him too. and I didn't find out about it until a week later, and I was heartbroken.
Oh.
So my grandmother probably wouldn't have wanted a funeral for herself because she also believed, listen, it's over, it's done, it's too late now. He can't hear us.
Now somebody watching might think, gee whiz, how cold is that? But
Right.
really, I mean, it's just, what you're describing is, I mean, it's not like you weren't mourning your grandfather, right? I mean, your grandmother, I mean, but it's just the process of letting go and, you know, just respecting their memory, but not just, you know.
Right. The thing is, I disagreed with this decision both times.
Yeah.
It upset me a lot because...
See, so maybe that's a thing that a person ought to think about before they die.
Right.
Okay. Do you really want a big funeral for yourself, or do you want to? Are you think about, well, gee, you know, my family's going to be like really frazzled, and you know, do I want to go ahead and
yet more stress?
And what with funerals costing, what the average is was like $7,000 these days, or something like that. I mean, just thinking about. I mean, my dad's always said, you know, Martin, I just want a pine box. That's all I want is a pine box. Yeah, and I'm like, well, you know, we'll probably do better than that, Dad.
As a matter of fact, there's a really great movie, and it's a book.
Yeah.
So
maybe, but that's a thing that the dying ought to think about, rather than just dying without your wishes being made clear, and leaving it all on the shoulders of your family, who are dealing with all kind of stuff, you know, mentally and emotionally and logistically, and just trying to deal with your estate and the fact that you died and all of that. And so that's maybe that's a thing that you ought to think about before you die.
Right.
And just to make sure that, okay, all is well.
There's a book. It's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. It's called Tuesdays with Maury, and they based a movie on it.
It's a Ted Koppel thing, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, he's a sports writer.
No, it's a Nightline guy.
Not sure. I can't remember the name of the guy.
Yeah.
But
guy named with the big hair, and he's
it's written by a guy that was a sports writer. It was a true story. I mean, this was a previous professor of his.
Yeah, and he went through the whole,
and he was a sports writer, and he found out that his professor was dying of Lou Gehrig's syndrome, which is a autoimmune disorder where your body starts kind of attacking itself. And he went and started interviewing his professor on end-of-life issues, and he got it all recorded on tape, and he wrote a book out of it, and then they made a movie with Jack Lemmon and Hank Azaria. I actually believe it might have been Jack Lemmon's last movie. I'm not sure, but
that's really
relatively recent. In this, the character Maury decided that he wanted to have a funeral before he died. He had all of his friends and family come over.
Best time to do it.
Well, yeah, then
say good
you
stuff
get to share
about
in the
him.
food.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, that is.
Hey, you get to share.
I want to make damn sure everyone says good stuff about me. So I'm coming to my funeral, and you guys better.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, he was of the belief, what happened if someone, you know, I want, if people are going to say good things about my life, I want them to say it while I'm still here to hear it.
You can hear about it. Yeah.
That's reasonable.
They never say it when I'm around.
That's reasonable, I suppose, and you know, you get to share in the food too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
We had anyway. Just finishing up about this issue with my grandmother. When she died, I talked to my dad and I was like, listen, I think that the problem is most atheists think that funerals are for religious people that want to talk, you know, say goodbye to this person, and that's just not how it has to be, because I need to be around other people that are mourning the loss of this person. I need to be in their company so that I can be sad with them, and so that we can talk about this person's life and how they touched us, and just kind of reflect on it. You don't have to say goodbye to the person that's already dead. And we did that. My brother, my dad, and I, we got together and we had a little memorial service, and we just talked about all of our good memories.
Yeah.
We cried together.
And that's just a way of dealing.
Yeah. It was a very good way of dealing.
Personally, I think I'd go for 2 funerals.
What?
Why not?
Before and after, you mean?
Well, before
sure.
would be kind of cool. But also, I mean, if you have a lot of family that is very religious and stuff like that, heck, I'm gone. I'm not going to know about it. I don't really care. If it's something that's going to make them happy.
Right. As I said before, right?
Make them happy.
Yeah. Some atheists
just
might
as long
not
as they're
care.
clear on my beliefs. If they think that they're doing something good and that's going to help them, go for it.
Yeah.
And then have another one for
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, as I said,
whoever's
some-
left and isn't religious and doesn't want to have to go to a freaking church.
Some people
to do
might
it.
not care. Some atheists
So-
might not care that their religious family members will hold a religious funeral for them.
Exactly.
Like, you know, so, but some atheists, you know, do care about it.
course,
So,
of course.
you know, in all instances, it's nice that you know, the dignity of the family is respected, and the dignity of the dead person.
Yeah.
And it's all, but it's all part of the process of.
I'll have a non-theistic,
Dealing.
atheistic funeral before I die, and then hey, if they want to, family wants to take my body and pray over it or something like that, I'll go for
That's
it.
up to
Let
them.
'em-
Kind of creepy, but
You're not there, so. Well, it's all very fascinating, Keryn, and you know, I'm sure you're going to have a really fruitful career in that.
Hopefully.
So yeah, so that's great. Well, thanks for coming on and talking to us about that. 'Cause
I'm
that's-
still available if anybody's
interesting.
watching that wants to hire me.
yeah. Make sure that you're clear on what you mean when you say that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Remember, this is cable access. You never know who's gonna. Yeah. You're not that available. Right. Okay. Well, time for the phone calls. We're halfway through the show, but you know, we had a lot to talk about today, and so thanks for joining us. This is once again a live call-in program. Unless you're watching us on our Tuesday rerun show, in which case don't call us because we're not here. But we're here right now, and the first person we're going to talk to evidently is named Norman. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey guys.
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
We got to adjust the. Okay, I think you're ready to go. We got to adjust the sound.
Okay, cool.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Y'all were bringing up some interesting points there just at the end that kind of, I'm not sure if it entirely answered my question, but it had to do with the nature of a funeral and who the funeral is actually for. Mm-hmm. Because in some respects it is to memorialize the person that's passed. But it is, like Ashley said, at the same time, it's for the people that are left behind, too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was just curious, as far as y'all were concerned, who do you see, like, say, for instance, if you wanted to be the determiner of your fate in terms of the way your funeral goes or is run, how do you, what parts of the funeral do you see being important to have a say over, or do you understand what I'm kind of saying? Because there seems to be like a theme that runs throughout all funerals, which is, you know, let's get together, talk about this person that's died, how we're all sad, kind of a community feeling, whether you're an atheist mourning over a Christian mourning over an atheist that meant something, whatever.
Right.
That's kind of a common thing that happens all the time.
Sure.
Where do y'all see some things that are, as far as you're concerned, that should be left up to the person that is dead?
Well, I would say first and foremost that you know, all decisions regarding ultimately, you know, the outcome of one's life ultimately, and of course death is an outcome of life, ought to be, you know, the person who ought to have the first say about that, you know, really ought to be the person in question. Whether you're just talking about a health issue, what's hospitalization, what kind of health care you want, all the way up into how you want to, you know, be memorialized after death, your aftercare, whether you want a big funeral or you don't want one, you want to spare, you know, your family, well, maybe simply because you want to spare them the expense, or just the whole idea that, or whatever idea you might have. I think ultimately what it does boil down to is just allowing the person who in question first say over how these things are dealt with. And then after that, you know, it's all down to the details of the individual. You know, as I said, Ashley doesn't really particularly care if his relatives have a religious funeral for them. I would have to say that, you know, I probably don't either, simply because, once again, I'm not there to participate in it, and if it would be a thing that would bring them comfort, because, you know, we recognize, even as atheists, that religious beliefs are a thing that bring believers comfort, then okay, fine. You know, I'm not going to begrudge someone I love the right to do that if that's a thing that brings some comfort.
But just to clarify that, I would also like it to be known, this is how I felt.
Yeah.
As in, I was not religious. You know, don't think that you're going to have to pray furiously over me for my, you know, for my benefit. If you're doing it for yourself, that's fine. Just, you know, just realize that I didn't believe it.
You know, I think if I were to think about what I would want at my funeral, I would like to have people talk about my life and how I touched them and how I affected the rest of the world. Because especially how I affected the world. Because when I die, I don't believe that I'm going to be going on to heaven. Or I don't believe I'm going to go on to hell either. I don't believe I'm going to go on anywhere. I'm dead. But I would love to believe that somehow I have immortalized myself by touching people's lives.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like people to talk about at my funeral, is how I've accomplished that.
And affected the world in some way.
Yeah, did I do anything to change the world? Did I do anything to change people's lives? Did I, you know, I'd rather not have people at my funeral sitting here talking about all the places I'm going and that Jesus loves me and, you know.
There's a concern that I have. That among, and my mother has this problem, and it's a real problem for her, and it's a thing that kind of breeds a little resentment in me, is that when you are an atheist and you have religious family members are, of course, now, if you die, right, if you have religious family members, the first and foremost thought that they're going to have in their head is that you are frying in hell right now because you weren't part of the club. And that
you can make some neat video footage of that.
But that's a thing. But as a result of that, that brings them a whole new quantum level of unnecessary anguish that they shouldn't have to feel. Yeah. And this is a case of a belief system that they have, making them feel this way when they really don't need to. Yeah. And that is a thing that I have a real problem with. And this is. Now again, I don't anticipate dying before my mother and father, but but I know that one thing that really, really upsets my mother, because she's profoundly religious, is that she fully buys into the doctrine of hell. And for her to think that I might die without becoming a Christian is a thing that really, really upsets her. I mean, it freaks her out. And this just kind of pisses me off, because I don't feel that she should have had this anguish introduced into her life through some irrational belief system. That there's this place of eternal punishment that everybody who doesn't belong to this one particular sect goes to just for not belonging to that sect. And that's a thing that I think is, so I'm more concerned really for her emotional state if I were to die, than I am about, what might happen to me. I mean, I'll be gone, but what will happen will be I left behind this, completely mentally fried parent. And that's a thing that I, just could completely include. That shouldn't have to happen, and I have a real problem with that. And it would be so much nicer if, we just recognize, some way to communicate to her, like, that's just not a thing you need to worry about, because the belief system's so ingrained.
That's a rough issue, because, I mean, I know for me, most of the people I know are atheists, my family members included. The ones that aren't atheists pretty much believe that when I die, I'm going on to heaven, not because I did or did not believe in Jesus Christ our Savior or God or whatever, but because I was a good person, I led a good life, I did good things, I'm very moral, so I'm going on to a better place just because I did things right.
Do you see it as a moral wrong, say for instance, if you just take a common problem like, say, a burial versus cremation, do you see it as a moral wrong for the family of someone who wants to be cremated, go ahead and take that body and then bury it? Do you see that as a problem? Do you see that as a moral wrong? If, for instance, if that made the family feel better, do you see that as a problem or something? I mean, obviously, the complaints are going to be minimal because the person that,
So I can't say anything about it now.
Exactly.
I don't know that I would see it as a moral wrong.
Impolite?
It would be, it would be more courteous. It would be more respectful of the dead person to honor their wishes. But again, I guess that's a quandary that a lot of families need to face when they have a loved one die, is to what degree, if our relative has just asked for something and we'd really rather do something else, that's kind of a bridge that you cross when you come to it, isn't it, when, with families?
For me, I'm going to say...
Is it a moral wrong, or is it just some weird, conflict that could arise?
I think it could be a conflict that could arise. I think it goes back to what Ashley said about what's going to make them feel better, because of course for me, I'll be dead. I won't care. I think the reason I would rather be cremated and sprinkled somewhere is that I'm not wasting any land space, and I'm pretty much being recycled. My ashes will, fertilize the plants that will grow up, and the whole cycle of life thing will The circle of life. Anyway, I think if it would make my family and my friends feel better to go ahead and bury me so that after I'm dead, they'll have some place that they can come back and visit and memorialize me and you know, think about me. If that would make them feel better, that'd be okay with me.
Okay.
I'd rather not.
If that were the case, I would say, yeah, definitely cremate and sprinkle in a park. Because if you got to go somewhere and remember somebody, a funeral with lots and lots, or a graveyard with lots and lots and lots of dead people around in the ground, or here's a nice park, here's some benches, here's a picnic area. That would be a heck of a lot better place to get.
Well, I mean, you know,
you want to go and remember this person, you know, kind of feel that you've got some kind of connection with them.
Well, graveyard's basically just a park with tombstones and dead people under it.
Well, yeah, but
It's
lots
just
and
a
lots of
grassy-
tombstones and dead people, and it's kind of, you know,
And you can't really
is it
use
just-
that space for anything
exactly.
else.
You can't
Doesn't-
bring the kids there and let them run
kind of
around,
a waste
you know.
of land.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that die all the time. It's kind of using our
But then,
space.
you know, old tombstones are just such cool, beautiful things. You know,
Sure.
It's like
That is
they
cool.
become monuments, and it's,
Yeah.
it's like
Well,
a,
you can
it's like a
really
big
Walk
museum.
around, find the old
It's a
ones.
big museum to the past. It's a big museum of past lives.
Just
when you
get
think
me
of
a
it.
stone bench and put my name in it or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's it. Shoot me out of a cannon, man. And just boom.
I want to know how
Wherever
far
I
I can
land.
go.
I know someone who wanted to, when she died, be what wolves do is they'll go out.
Makes you want to be eaten by
No. I think she said something along the lines of what wolves do is they'll go somewhere into the wilderness or something, and they'll, for example, perch themselves on a rock that overlooks the valley, and they'll just kind of sit there, lay down, and die.
Really?
Then what they do is their body just kind of dehydrates. And so it's not like they you know,
almost.
it's
Well,
almost
that would
like they're
depend on the
mummified.
climate, but-
So it's not like they kind of decompose as much as you would if you were being buried. And so it's almost like they just kind of stay there perfectly preserved.
So wait a minute. She wants to wander off into the woods and just die
Yeah.
and just stay there.
Yeah,
And
just
just
stay there
exposed to
overlooking
the
some
elements.
beautiful valley. Yeah, exposed to the elements.
Well, you know,
overlooking some
forensic
I hate
valley.
to see what
Yeah.
the legal issues of that would be.
Yeah, yeah. If they found her, she'd probably get, you know,
Right, that's the
boxed up and
problem.
carried away.
But I
Yeah,
mean, if you
it's-
leave your will with someone, can the law really step in and do something? I don't know.
Well,
if you say this
you know,
is
there's
what
just
I-
If it's
where-
private property land,
dead bodies lying
it probably
around
wouldn't
is
be
a
that
thing
much of an issue.
People frown
But
on.
don't crawl
But-
onto someone's private property and die.
well, yeah, but that's what I mean. If it's a public park, they
Well-
probably don't want you to die there. Thank you very much.
Well, we're getting on into.
I just got one more thing I was going to ask, and if you want me to wait till next week to get to another caller, you can.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, it doesn't have to do with the death as much as it does, because I asked about last week about the irrational, the use of the word
Oh,
irrational.
right. I remember. Yeah, you called at the end of the show, and we didn't really get to
Right.
talk in detail about it.
Right. Well, that's what I was kind of wondering about too. The idea of it being an irrational belief system, because you think that there is a God.
Okay, let me clarify what I mean.
Okay, cool.
'Cause I didn't hear. The main reason, the only reason that I would consider theism, in general, not to be a rational way to go about things, is simply because among all of the theists that I've spoken to, and Christians and otherwise, on this show, and I've been doing this show about 2.5 years. It's well over 100 shows, you know, several callers per show. A lot of people, a lot of folks I've spoken to. Even the guys who call us up and they have really well thought out arguments, it does seem to always be a matter where it ultimately boils down to believing on faith. And okay, fine. That's if I'm not begrudging anyone the right to do that. But there's a difference between, okay, considering the possibility that there might be some sort of higher power out there, and adopting a belief system that you hold to whatever degree of, you know, strident, you know, and or whether you get dogmatic about it or not, just establishing some sort of solid belief system where you say this is the way it is, but you admit that you don't really have all the evidence, you're just kind of taking it on faith. Well, then whether it's a thing where you've chosen to believe in a God, or you think that you know, leprechauns talk to you, or what have you, whatever it is that you're just when in the final analysis taking it purely on faith, that's just not the most rational way to go about your business. The best way to make informed decisions about what you believe and what you think in life is to wait and see what the evidence really shows you and just facing up to that. And if the evidence is a thing that doesn't really confirm whatever your pet theory or belief system is, you know, being solid enough to just admit that and go, okay, gee, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's something else, I need to change the way I'm thinking about this.
But see, the only problem I have with that is that ultimately everyone is in the same boat. Is that everyone, ardent atheists included, have to at some point believe something that isn't rational.
Like what? Like what would I, give me an example of something I would believe in that isn't rational. Okay, now remember, as an atheist, all I say is that I don't believe in God. Mm-hmm. And the reason I don't believe in God is because theists have not proven his existence.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm totally open to having my mind changed if I'm presented with great evidence.
Sure, and that mind change, I would think, would come about as a result of me bringing God to the station and saying, here he is, and then him performing some kind of
I don't know what form it would take. I really don't know.
That's another
I really
another road we would have to go down for God to prove that he's God sitting in front of you. I mean, that's
I really don't know what form that sort of evidence would take. I have no idea.
I understand.
But I'm open to be presented to anything.
Sure.
But as a result of
what
that,
I'm saying is that I don't think that the evidence that you demand of Christianity or of a God, I don't think that you demand it of science.
Sure I do.
No, I don't think you do.
Why would
Because I don't think that you're a scientist, first of all. And I think ultimately what you believe is stuff that people have written, that no one has sat down in front of you and said, Martin, here it is, and showed you at any point. They have not categorically, empirically shown you, Martin or Ashley, how anything in the universe works. You basically ultimately have to believe what they have said.
Yes, but you have to remember the process of science is different than the process of religion.
Now, I'm aware
There's
of the process
a lengthy
of science.
investigative process. Scientists aren't guys who just make stuff up and put it out there and say this is how it is. I mean, there is a long investigative process that has to be gone through, and then usually the proper procedure is scientists will have to submit papers to professional journals, which are then reviewed by their peers. You know, their peers in the field will take whatever theory they're proposing and they will test it and they will see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then you have to say, oh, well, that doesn't work. I mean, the processes of science, the reason I trust the process of science is simply because it is an investigative process that has this sort of built-in fail-safe system.
But none of it is proven to you, Martin. None of it's been proven to you.
Well, okay.
That's the argument that you would bring to me. I would say, look, I believe the testimony of Paul.
Okay.
I believe the testimony of the people who say they saw Jesus rise from the dead. I believe that. And you would say something like, they made it up, or they're liars, or they're all crazy.
I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Well, no,
I mean,
like whatever it is, for whatever reason you would say, I'm irrational for believing those guys. I could turn and say, you're irrational for believing scientists who have never proven anything to you to your face.
I have I mean, they do show proof. I mean, if you read these articles, they'll show you the calculations of how they got to this conclusion. They'll show you
you're
a
talking
picture.
about stuff that, I mean, like, you're not even dealing with a specific realm of science at all. I mean, you're just talking about stuff that doesn't mean anything.
But I mean, it's like, for example,
that's
they
the
used
process
to
they
believe.
go through.
No. Yeah. What she just said is as vague as anything I can imagine.
Okay, what she meant was if you read any sort of scientific journal or paper, okay, and you get one, and you're going to see bibliographical notes, you're going to see the actual. It's not just some guy saying, I think rubbing a puppy dog against your stomach will cure tummy aches. I mean, they don't just come out and say stuff. They need to present their evidence. They say
that works
here,
for me though.
Well, sure. I mean, and if they don't present what their actual research was and what their actual findings were, then you would look at it and say, well, wait a minute, you're making this claim, but what can I do to test your claim? And that is what they have to present you with. Here's what I did to reach the conclusions I've reached. So they give you a process that you can actually test and do it. And if other people are able to do it independently and get the same results confidently, then what you end up with in science is a finding that is provisionally true.
Right. Okay. And I think that there have been things that have been declared true that later on have been found to be false.
Absolutely.
And ultimately,
the
beliefs that people had concerning science that was inherently true, not just provisionally, but it was accepted as fact, they came back later and saw, gosh, we were wrong.
Yes, but
I can appreciate that. I'm not indicting science.
And that's science. We find out what the truth is. We don't all know it today. We're not going to know it tomorrow. But we're going to get there slowly. We're going to head in the right direction.
There are things that y'all believe that have not been proven.
Like? Well, evolution. Okay, here's the thing.
Evolution. I mean, it's not proven.
Well, no, actually, the genetic underpinnings of evolution are beyond dispute.
Okay.
The genetic underpinnings of evolution are beyond dispute. I mean, we know life forms evolve. We can see it. We've observed speciation. We know that the fundamental principles of evolution are sound. The processes by which evolution undergoes, now that's a whole different, that's a horse of another color. And yeah, that's an ongoing field of study. I mean, there is a lot that we don't know still. But that's the whole process. What you're describing is, far from being a weakness of science, one of its greatest strengths, is that it does have this procedure of finding and correcting its own mistakes.
No, I'm not.
And there's no parallel to that in religion. And it's not. Okay. And I wouldn't. Again, I would differ with you in that, I don't believe. Okay. I don't believe that if I drop this pin off the table, it will fall. Okay, I know it does. I don't believe that the sun rises in the east every morning. I know it does. I mean, because I understand that, these are things that have been proven to me through observed processes, and then they're explained to me, through science. Science explains to me why it is that the Earth spins on its axis and why we have day and night and seasons and what have you. And I understand that those are the problems. Once science explains something, it's not really a matter of needing to believe it. All you say is, well, this is what the evidence shows us. This is where we are right now with the current evidence that we've got. Could we be somewhere else tomorrow completely different? Absolutely we could.
Right.
So, but if anybody tells you, oh, well, this is, something that, I believe, I mean, there are scientists out there doing bad science. They're like the cold fusion guys and what have you. Yeah. If anybody in science who has this pet theory that he won't let go of, regardless of what the evidence shows you, yeah, that is somebody doing bad science. Just having a scientific education doesn't mean you're going to think critically. Sure. It doesn't mean somebody is going to make the right decisions all the time. But at least it gives us a roadmap to where we can get to where we need to go.
Right, and I don't indict science. I don't have a problem with science. The issue that I was addressing is what people believe about the things that they have been told that people that they don't know have proven. And the only point that I'm trying to make is that ultimately, since you don't perform any kind of tests and you don't see these things that people claim happen, I don't see too much of a difference than me believing something that somebody said about some dude that was crucified that rose again. I don't see anything as
Let me put it this way: if your car is in the shop and if you're having car trouble and it goes to the shop, you put it in the shop and the guy fixes it and it comes out fixed.
Right.
Does the fact that you didn't fix it yourself means that you don't believe it was necessarily fixed? I mean, I respect experts to a certain degree. I understand that there are people who are more educated in certain fields than I am.
Right.
Okay, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not qualified really to fully medicate myself if I get ill. So at a certain point, yeah, you do have to trust somebody who have proven that they have at least a level of expertise that qualifies them to make a finding about something. I am willing to, if there's some biologist who has gone to school for 8 years and they have a PhD and they are a well-respected expert in their field, I'm willing to take them seriously when they talk about something pertaining to their field.
And I think that's wise that you do that.
Okay, so it's not just, oh, well, some guy said something that he pulled out of his butt, so I'm going to believe it. I mean, it's much different. I would be much more willing to take that person's word on some fact pertaining to biology than I would some fellow who is actually a garage mechanic.
Yep.
Okay, I would rather, I'll be happy to get his opinion on what's wrong with my car, but maybe he's not necessarily qualified to talk about, speciation or, that's so yeah, there's a certain degree at which there's nothing wrong with trusting an expert whose credentials are solid.
Or witness testimony, for that matter. And see, that's the thing. Is that
but who's the witness? I mean, again...
No, I understand, but what I'm saying is that I don't see the jump from believing something that some guy, even a guy that you could go and talk to today who could essentially prove it to you in front of your face. Mm-hmm. I don't see too big of a jump in believing somebody who wrote an article and then believing something that these guys way back a long time ago said, and then laid their life on the line for it. Not to say that that's a proof for anything.
Yeah.
Lots of people lay their lives down on the line for a lot of stuff, but at the same time, I'm not seeing.
Yeah. Like I'll tell you where I would draw the distinction, and then actually you guys can go. I'll just say, if those guys, I know you're bursting at the seams. I'm sorry. I'm the host. I have this habit of jumping in. If these ancient writings, are providing me with the same standards of that allow, if I'm able to read what these guys did and do the test for myself and get the results that these guys got, I'll be happy to take an ancient writing just as seriously as I take a modern scientific writing on anything. It has to do with what you're presented. Doesn't matter if it's ancient, doesn't matter if it's modern, doesn't matter if it's about some scientific theory or some historical fact. If there's something that I can look at in whatever it is I'm reading and say, interesting, I wonder what, if I tried that, would I get the same results? All right, then, again, you're right, you kind of have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but the point is, use critical thinking in all areas. That's
I
the
understand.
point.
All I'm saying is that it's not irrational to believe something that someone wrote and believed themselves.
All right. I would agree with you that it's not irrational to say, this guy wrote this and he's very, very sincere and believes it.
Yes.
So in that regard, I can at least, it's at least worth taking seriously to that degree.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Okay, that's cool.
All right, you folks go, and then we really got to get on to more callers.
Hey, but I just want to thank you all for thinking.
Hey, thanks. Well, that's what we do. It's a habit that we pick up and can't find hard to shake. So
Thanks, y'all.
Take care, man.
Listen, I wanted to add to that scientific research that is published in a scientific journal is, in order to get published in a scientific journal and to be proven as a scientific theory or a scientific whatever, it has to be a theory that is tested and retested. It has to be proven valid and reliable. I've just come out of grad school, so I've got this valid and reliable stuff coming out of my ears. In order to do that, it has to be something that you can set up a specific formula. Anybody can perform this experiment and come up with the same results. Once it has reached this level of being validated,
it doesn't even get to be called a theory until you get to that.
Right.
Only after you have that is it actually published.
Right. Only after you have all that is it actually published. It is.
And then after it's published, everybody else behind them, all the other scientists pick it up and say, ooh, let's try this too.
I guess.
And so if they start trying to do it, just like the cold fusion, if they pick it up and say, well, we did the same stuff and it didn't really work right. Well, then you pick it up and say, well,
if it makes believers more comfortable to believe that atheists believe in things that can't be proven too, then I would say that yes, it has been proven that the Earth is round, beyond a doubt. Yes, the process
it's been proven
of
that life forms evolve.
It has been proven that life forms evolve. In fact, I think we're still evolving.
Yes. Remember, evolution is just changes in gene frequency over time as a result of da-da-da-da.
I believe that the universe was created by a Big Bang. I do not know where that Big Bang came from. I am not going to say that since I don't know where that came from, God must have done it. Therefore, I do believe that eventually in the future, we are going to figure it out. We don't know that now. If that means...
And if you don't know things, there's nothing wrong with saying, sorry, I don't know how this... that's the honest thing to say.
Exactly.
The honest thing to do when you have gaps in your knowledge is to say, I don't know anything about that thing. It is not honest to just take a belief and say, okay, well, here's a gap in my knowledge, so I'm going to fill this in with a belief so that the picture is complete for me.
If that means that I believe in something that right now someone else can say is irrational because I don't know the answer, then go ahead and believe that I believe in something irrational.
Okay. Ashley, your turn, and then we really got to get to our next callers. Sorry, folks, this is what happens on our show. We have very interesting, in-depth conversations.
Basically had what I had to say.
Okay.
So basically, essentially, just that it's tested thoroughly before it's ever published.
And we did
Once
get
it's
something
published, it's retested again.
And this week, what have we just found? We have actually found now more solid evidence for the Big Bang.
Yes.
That pesky Big Bang that we keep getting told there's no evidence for. There has been an observation in Antarctica just this week from the observatory in Antarctica, again confirming how the cosmic background radiation is being this footprint, essentially, of some sort of massive quantum event. Which is what we think the Big Bang.
Retesting ideas, retesting discoveries.
Now, again, that doesn't mean we know for 100% infallible certainty how the universe got going, but this is evidence that's pointing us towards confirming a theory, but it still needs more study, right? Because none of us can actually hop on a time machine and go back to the beginning of time. If we did, we'd kind of be in trouble because we'd be caught in the Big Bang. But that would. But still, that's just how it works. It is this ongoing process of study. And no, I'd say it's, let's see, Colin is on line 3. Let's see if he has anything to... Hi, thanks for holding. You're on the air.
Hi, guys. That was pretty intense there, wasn't it?
Well, it happens. But
right,
sorry, I know you've got cauliflower ear now, so...
I've got a problem with atheists in general. I just think it's a contradiction by definition. You spend all your time kind of denouncing existence of God or saying you don't believe in it.
No, not all my time, but
I don't sit around having a cable access show saying I don't believe in pink elephants. If I did, you know, we all know they don't exist or something, but by just by denying they exist and getting in, you know, going so far as to get a show about pink elephants.
You know
you're
something.
Kind of saying
If everybody else in
but I
society,
choose not to believe in it. You know what I mean?
Everybody else in society, or 80% of the population, said, "Yeah, pink elephants. I see them all the time." Then you'd be scratching your head, saying, "What the heck are you smoking?"
Yeah.
And so that's basically what we're doing here.
And if we lived in a country where politicians were saying, you know, we need placards in public schools proclaiming that all must obey the pink elephant's commandments, and we need to have prayers to the pink elephants in schools, and we need to have one nation under the big pink elephant in our Pledge of Allegiance, and everybody must. Then yeah, it would probably, then it would suddenly make a whole lot of sense for people who didn't believe in pink elephants to put on a television show saying, hey, we're not sure about this pink elephant stuff.
By just saying you don't believe in pink elephants means that, I mean, you're just saying that they exist and you choose not to believe in it.
No, it means that we don't
believe
believe
in pink elephants? You brought it up.
The more you deny them, the more you're admitting that it does exist.
You brought up the pink elephant.
Wait. How does that work?
Wait.
How does that
Can I say
work?
something?
I'd love to hear him explain how that works.
I just want to say, though, that, I mean, a lot of people believe in this God. And a lot of people live their lives based on their belief. And a lot of people know that there are people out there that don't believe in God and don't understand how you can live your life not believing in God. And they have a lot of questions for us. They don't understand what we believe happens after you die. They don't understand why we live moral lives. They don't understand why we live at all and we don't just kill ourselves because there's no point to our life or whatever. Basically, the point of a cable access television show is so that callers like you who have questions can call in and we can just educate them.
Well,
excellent.
But I'd still love to hear how it is that saying you don't believe in something means you really do.
Regardless, I don't sit around trying to tell people that pink elephants don't exist.
Because not everybody's saying that they do.
That would be kind of a waste of my time, wouldn't it?
Well, not everyone's saying that they do. I mean, if it were this thing, if belief in pink elephants.
Do pink elephants exist?
I'm sure you could go to a zoo with a big thing of pink paint an elephant, and you would have yourself a pink elephant. Sure, I mean, you could make one. But the point we're trying to make, that I want to reiterate just to make sure you understand it, is if belief in pink elephants were this thing that were just a major deal in our society, where if you didn't believe in pink elephants, you were somehow looked down upon, and you weren't really given a very fair voice in the political process, and there were people out there saying, we want your children in public schools to pray to pink elephants, then yeah, it would make sense to have a TV show saying, it's not a good idea to believe in pink elephants. But people aren't saying that in pink elephants. They happen to be saying it about something called God. So that's why we have this program. If the focus changes to pink elephants tomorrow,
I'm sticking my head up a bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it. You know what I mean?
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
He blew it. Sorry.
I could take that same argument though.
Obviously, he's a perfect example of the Norman, you wanted to know about Irrational? There you go.
Wait, I could take that same argument though. I could pit it against believers, saying that if you believe in God, you believe that the universe is run by God, you think that everything has to do with God, but every single week you have to go into church and talk about this guy in order to convince yourselves that he really does exist, then maybe the fact that you believe in God really means that you don't believe in God. I could take that same argument. I mean, it makes just as sense.
And they actually have a hard time doing it because they got entire channels devoted to themselves. We got an hour and a half.
Oh yeah, they've got an entire television.
Yeah, exactly. How many Christian full-time television networks are there out there? Like 5? I get digital cable, so I know
one's cable access.
And so there's at least 6. There are 6 24-hour-a-day television stations out there where Christians are delivering their message, and we have an hour and a half every week to sort of deliver, an opposing point of view. But according to Colin thinks that's too much.
Right. I mean, if you have to talk about it all the time, maybe you're trying to convince yourself that it really is true.
Yeah. So, but we tried to make Colin understand how it is that, what the whole point of opposing points of view, and he just didn't really get it, I guess. So, we can't help that. Manda's online too. Let's see what she has to say. Manda.
Hello?
Manda?
You there?
Hello?
Oh,
no,
hang on one second.
This is Morton.
Hang on. Okay.
Well, no,
go ahead. We'll talk. How you doing?
I'm sorry. I missed the beginning of your show. I kind of turned it on right when you were in the middle of talking about the wolves, I guess. Could you repeat that part? I caught the tail end of it. I was trying to catch what y'all were talking about.
Well, I'm a gerontological social worker, and we were talking about death and dying and end-of-life processes. And what you want, if atheists should plan their own deaths and their own funerals and think about what they want to happen to them after they die. And I was just sort of bringing up that I know someone that after she dies would like...
Wants to wander off in the woods and
wants to, yeah.
die like a wolf.
Whatever
floats your boat.
That's kind of what I've heard now. Just kind of want to bring that up. I thought it was kind of interesting because let's say, like, somebody were to witness that, and then I'd more than likely, rape her life's body and feed her to the pigs and everything.
Well, I think that if, any dead body that's found out in the woods is pretty much going to cause a panic and a major law enforcement investigation and blah, blah, blah.
You definitely want to make sure that it's in your will that that's what you wanted to do.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be...
But even then, I think that it would still that would be one of those wills that's not honored, by the law.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that. What's your monkey on the left? What's your name?
Monkey. Ashley?
That's me.
Yeah,
what's your name?
dickhead on the phone, goodbye. All right.
Can
All right,
say
man. Yeah, I can say whatever I want. All right. Manda?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
There you are. Sorry.
Hi guys, welcome to Sunday.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, but I'm kind of sitting here bouncing in my seat going, ooh, 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 ooh.
I have, yeah.
We had a caller who was talking about what's the difference between somebody told you something and told you to believe it, and somebody told you something and they claim to be scientific about it. I'd like to introduce the concept once again of the pedigree of credibility and evidence. If your mother tells you, take this aspirin, it'll cure your headache, you can say, well, Mom, how do you know? And she might say, well, it says here on the package, and there are laws against lying on your advertising. So then you can say, well, where did that come from?
Well, that doesn't stop all the natural medicine folks.
Well,
and that's a whole unregulated...
my thread here. The pedigree of evidence is, well, you go from there to, well, more than one doctor recommends this product. And you say, well, how did these doctors get here? Well, they went to medical school. Well, how do we know that they weren't just some guys who decided in the 1800s to say, I'll call you an MD if you call me an MD, and then we won't let anybody be an MD unless they pay us a lot of money. How do you know? Well, you can go back and you can research this at any point in the process. You can say, this study on aspirin, show me the results. You can go back and say, is there really an American Medical Association that accredited those medical schools? And then when you come to the very, very back of it, the farthest away from the layperson, ignorant me, the farthest you can get from that, the question is, well, how do you know they're reputable? And then I can't look at their evidence because I am not going to go to medical school for 20 years. But what I can do is I can question their methodology. Do they go around saying, believe this and don't question it, and you're evil if you dare to question it, it's immoral to question it? Or do they say, we're doing the best that we can, we don't have a foregone conclusion, we disseminate information only after we've tested it, and if something new comes along, we're willing to adopt something new. Science is a very, very slippery kind of thing. We're opportunists, profiting by science. And scientists themselves are opportunists. Anytime something gets proven wrong, why, we're free, we have all the freedom to say, okay, this is the new thing, and we don't believe it. We trust it. That's a very different thing. There's a very different thing between trusting the Bible is true and believing the Bible is true. You can trust it because your mother said it and you rely on your mother, but that's different from thinking that it really happened. And how you bridge that gap between faith and acting knowledge is important too. I don't trust that Jesus really existed. And conversely, I don't believe that aspirin cures my headache. But when I have a headache, it's to aspirin that I'm going to turn and not to prayer. Because I can go and trace that pedigree of evidence and come back to hundreds of people who have spent their lifetime disproving things, proving things, and best of all, scientists try to disprove each other.
Again, there's that system of checks and balances that's built into the whole process.
Right.
And you don't get a parallel to that in religion, right? I mean, you have on one channel Pat Robertson saying, God spoke to me and he said this, and then on another channel you have some other guy saying, God spoke to me and he said that. And it's just guys saying stuff.
Additionally, with science, you should be able to repeat the experiment yourself. I mean, if you read a scientific journal, they should tell you exactly what they did, exactly how many subjects they used, exactly what disbursement of their subjects there were, exactly what process they took, and exactly what conclusions they came to. If you want to do the test, well, let's see. Today I have a really bad headache. I'm going to take some aspirin, see if it goes away. Tomorrow I'm going to repeat it and see if it still works, and then I'll probably repeat it for a couple of days after that. If it continues to work, well, then I know that aspirin works. Now I'm going to try another experiment that says, today I have a headache. I'm going to pray to God and see if it goes away. Tomorrow I'll try it again, and maybe if I'll get the same results, maybe it won't, and you could try, you can test the experiment yourself and prove it for yourself. I can't prove to myself that this other person saw Jesus Christ, or that I saw Jesus Christ, or whatever, that if I do this, he'll come to me.
The important point is that what it boils down to is that is that science isn't just about some guy said something, so believe what he said because he's the guy in the lab coat. It's trusting a methodology and a process that has been shown to just work.
And the checks and balances don't just go up to a body of authorities. The American Medical Association is held accountable by the U.S. government and by the system of universities, which are independent of it. And these organizations are aware what it would be bad to get a monopoly on the ideas, a monopoly on the data.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to the topic of the show, I'm going to switch tracks.
Yeah, just like a minute, because we want to try to get to one more guy before the show's over.
Keryn, you were speaking about what the purpose of a funeral was for you and your family. For me, the purpose of a funeral is, this is a ceremony that helps me through stages of grief. And there's a stage of grief traditionally believed to exist that is denial. I can't believe grandmother has really died. I can't believe Bob is really gone. And this is why we have, open casket funerals. It's kind of a ghoulish thing to pump somebody up full of chemicals and then stick them on display like a feast, on a table or in a very fancy
that really bugs me.
chiffon box. But the point of that is for people to come together and to have real evidence that somebody really is gone, so you can get past that, because the healing, the happy memories come most freely when you've accepted, okay, this part of your existence where you had this other person in your life, it's over. And that's the point to funerals for me. I feel very awkward about going to a funeral of somebody I didn't know very well that I'm not really going to miss. And when I think about what to do after I die, I'd like for there to be a memorial to me, but it doesn't have to be the physical location of my body.
Well, sure, you can have a wake anywhere. Right.
Well, we've got a monument in Comfort to the freethinkers
who died.
Well, that rock is still out there. I think that's an important thing to memorialize, to go and remember those people.
Yeah, I think it is. Just like we had our memorial a week and a half ago. Just more or less. But thanks for calling, Manda. We got a couple minutes, so I want to try to get one more call in, but we'll appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you real soon. See ya. All right, and we'll and just to say, I mentioned earlier, again, I don't like to cut off callers and snap at people or anything, but look, we're just here to talk to folks, answer questions. This is a friendly, open show. All right, so we'll be friendly and open to you.
We want to keep it friendly.
Yeah, so we're perfectly happy to be friendly to folks. If you don't want to be friendly, it's your problem. You get to be talking to a dial tone, but we're here to talk to grown-up people, and Bill is one, I'm sure. Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for holding. I'm sorry we've only got about a minute to talk to you, but what's up?
Oh, I was just wondering, you can't deny the fact that there is out there, undeniable evidence that there is a God,
Well, we do deny it. That's why we're
very deniable evidence.
Yeah, we didn't. That's why we're atheists. I mean, if we thought that there was solid evidence that there was a God, we wouldn't be atheists.
Yeah. Well, just little things when you look at the word sausage, for example, spelled backwards, Jesus. Jesus spelled backwards sounds like sausage.
I never thought of it that way, but now suddenly, the whole the Last Supper makes sense, and suddenly communion makes sense now. Yeah, all right. Now we know what they're all doing. It's eating a big Jesus sausage. Thanks, man. All right. Well, there you go. That's
one of the
Stranger proofs, I've heard.
That's right. Now,
but hey,
so
one more piece of evidence.
One more reason to be a vegan, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Hey, listen, thanks a lot for joining us. As always, you never know what you're going to get on the Atheist Experience. That's why it's the most fun show on cable access.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
coming on the show. Very interesting topic, and hope to have you on again at some point. Thanks to our stalwart crew and everybody in Atheist Community of Austin, all of our viewers. Atheist Experience viewers are the best. This show is here, like I said, every Sunday at 4:30. So we'll see you next time. Reruns Tuesday on this channel at 4:30 as well. So everybody have a great rest of your weekend. Christians,
we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong.
Bye-bye.
Have a good